Hi, I'm Dan Costa. I'm the editor-in-chief of Techonomy and Worth Media, and we're here to talk about AI and cybersecurity. I want to welcome our guests who are joining from all over the world today. We've got a great panel of to talk about this subject, each from their own perspective. Paolo Del Cin is with us. He is the global lead of Accenture Security. Paolo, thanks for dialing in from Milan.
Thank you so much, Dan, for having me. Really great to be here with all of you.
We also have Sunil Patti, the General Manager and Vice President of Cloud Security at Google Cloud. Sunil, thanks for dialing in.
Likewise, Dan, I'm great to be on this panel, and it would have been even better if I was in Italy with Paolo, but we'll get there soon.
Well, hopefully by the end of this call, we'll get invitations and a reason to join him. And finally, we've got Michael Frazee. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at Lend-Lease. Michael, thanks for calling.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
So we're here to talk about AI and security. Obviously, AI is a very buzzy subject right now. In the last 12 months, everyone has had some exposure to generative AI. Hundreds of millions of people have tried ChatGPT. So it's in the public conversation now in a way it really hasn't been before. But AI is, for the folks on this call, is not something new to the security space. It's something that has been deployed for a long time. But I think we are at an inflection point in how it's being used is changing. And Paolo, maybe we start with you and just talk a little bit about how this new generation of generative AI, most people understand it can be a little chatbot, it can create interesting images. How is this going to affect the security space? How has it affected it already, and where do you see it going in the future?
Well, Dan, first of all, I think that you are totally right. Generative AI especially is changing, I think, the pace and the scale of this digital revolution that we are all living. As Accenture, we believe that the generative AI will also empower enterprises to do much better business in a more efficient way. We are investing today $3 billion in data and AI over the next 3 years. And talking about cybersecurity, honestly, I think that generative AI at the same time is at the biggest risk and also the biggest opportunity. And talking about the biggest opportunity, there are plenty of, let's say, use cases where we can, be empowered by generative AI in order to defend our enterprises, our government in a much better way. So thinking about a few examples, I think that we can really leverage generative AI in order to detect and respond more timely to cyber attack. And you know that in this moment in time, our enterprises across the globe are really under attack from many different threat actors. So time, scale, and speed are very important. So I think that this innovation race started again between attackers and defenders. And we need to think about how we can keep the pace, retooling ourselves using generative AI for defense goal, not just as a weapon. And then we need also to understand how the new, threat actor are leveraging a generative AI against us. And this is the moment in time that we are living. As Accenture, we are, working with our client in order to protect them from this kind of cyber attack in a way that we can use generative AI. It's one example, very important for us, is to power our managed detection and response service with one great example, Google Cloud Generative AI. So in this moment in time, we are protecting clients like Lend-Lease, just for example, Michael, in order to have a much better detection rate, a better response rate. This will not, let's say, replace totally the humans, for sure. Humans will be very important in the defense strategy, but this is for sure impacting our way of working and also to become more effective in our defense mission.
So let's you mentioned Google Cloud, so that's a good transition to Sunil. I was just watching, since I've been researching this panel and doing all these searches, I've been bombarded with Google Cloud security advertisements. And that phrase that Google protects more Americans than any other company keeps ringing in my head because I've seen the advertisement so much. But can you talk a little bit about how Google Cloud is deploying AI today?
Yeah, no, happy to, Dan. And by the way, just as minor note, so obviously the advertisement should have said we protect more people on the planet than anyone else.
That's right.
But you know, as most of you know, Google has been, I would say, interestingly, not just a major pioneer of the entire AI industry. Most of generative AI is based on that one seminal paper, sort of subtly called as "attention is all you need." But man, you really needed a lot of attention to understand that paper. But that was the foundation for generative AI, and we've between DeepMind and Google research, there's a significant amount of energy, investment, and cycles being spent alongside both organically as well as with partners like Accenture. And the way in cloud we have brought it together is to actually harness all the collective work of DeepMind in the background, but to make it responsible from an enterprise consumption, from a privacy perspective, from a data integrity perspective, and a bunch of things that we'll talk about. And then security is built on top of that, as we'll talk about, as to say, hey, how do we take these capabilities to both proactively enhance our abilities to get to a better security posture, but at the same time also better equip our defenders to stay ahead of the attackers, right? And I'm sure one of the things we'll talk about is, good actors get a lot more productive with Gen AI, but bad actors can get 10 times more worse with Gen AI. So that's what we are preparing for, to ensure that in the spirit of keeping the world safer, can Gen AI be used more to kind of bring an edge to simplifying security, while at the same time, knowing that the landscape on the attack side is also going to change. And so how to kind of stay a step ahead of that. Okay.
So Michael, we've got a couple of people that are involved in sort of defending infrastructure. You've got a business that you are in charge of defending and setting up the protections. How do you see the advent of this new generation of AI sort of affecting your day-to-day posture?
Yeah, no, thanks, Dan. Look, I think Paolo and Sunil have sort of laid out a good sort of framework around where we're looking. A lot of what we need to do to help protect, I guess, against generative AI is around the speed in which we do that, right? And leveraging it to contextualize the events that are coming through, right? And that's where generative AI is going to provide security teams really some benefit, is that rather than pulling all these points of data to contextualize an event and to determine whether that event is good or bad, it'll be done through the machine learning, through the generative AI, and give them some context to then work with and be able to respond to. So, the story that people will lose jobs will just be different in the security world, and the information that our security teams will get will be enriched better with the data sets that they get through this process through generative AI. Now, for Lend-Lease, obviously, we're protecting. We do both build to own and manage type assets. So we've got a large sort of portfolio of systems that we've got to protect against, and it's incumbent on us to make sure that we're getting as much of the telemetry into our system so that we can then respond to those threats quickly. And that's why we're partnering both with Accenture and Google in this space to make sure that we can do that.
So I'm gonna, over the course of this call, I'm gonna keep trying to get you guys to because most people don't have the access that you do, and don't see these dashboards and these monitoring tools. And I want to get as much specifics from you as I possibly can. Because also a lot of times people don't like to talk about security problems out in the open. But so can walk us through like a little bit about how this advanced detection and how AI monitoring can give you that speed advantage and help you respond to threats faster. And maybe we'll go with you, Paolo, to start off.
Yeah, sure. So I think that our job today, honestly, is not one of the easiest in the planet. So our security operations center, and this is the same more or less, I believe, for every company in the world, are today overwhelmed by security alert and event. As you said, what is popping up in our dashboard? Too many events. This is the current situation. So you cannot, employ or think to employ a huge, so-called level 1. So many people that are looking at the dashboard, at the screen, at the CM, platform, in order to try to understand in a million of alert if there is a real tangible incident going on, a real cyber attack that is threatening a company, security posture. And then they have a second challenge. They are using probably between 50 and 80 different tools. So they needed to look not at just one dashboard, but multiple dashboards in order to understand what is going on. And they are constantly overwhelmed. So from a more strategic perspective, I believe that instead our CISO in every company needed to become more the security advisor of the firm in order to protect their businesses and their enterprises, more than spending time on looking dashboard and event. So what is the generative AI response here? Is able, to manage millions of events and correlate them in the most speedy way possible in order to detect well-known and maybe also very soon also the so-called zero-day attacks, so attacks that are not yet well-known, based on anomaly detection, based on unknown patterns or kind of anomalies that they are able to detect much more quickly. And then I think that they can, we can also leverage generative AI also for more detailed tasks. If you think about, an incident that is at the end detected, so is a real cyber attack that we wanted to consider, I think that the generative AI can really help us on doing threat hunting, and so doing also malware analysis. So considering what is happening in the company, we can understand better and more quickly which kind of threat actor are attacking us with which kind of techniques. And so we can, share with a generative AI engine all the, let's say, IOC, all the information that we are collecting from our environment in order to have a very comprehensive view, also including probably now also some threat intelligence feed. And thinking about what we are doing with Google, we are also joining forces between Mandiant threat intelligence and Accenture threat intelligence, so formerly PipSite and iDefense, in order to have a very comprehensive view about the threat landscape, what is happening in the firm, in the company, and then using all this information in real time in order to be digested by a generative AI engine and take supported decision. Generative AI in this moment is not running security on our behalf, but will become like a very good assistant.
So I think and we've talked a little bit about the cat and mouse game, and that, obviously generative AI can provide these defensive capabilities, but it's also providing a lot of opportunity for attackers and the other side. Sunil, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you see the threat landscape changing. Have the attacks, are they just more multiple? Are they more sophisticated? What are you seeing in terms of how the threats are changing themselves?
No, I think, and I'll caveat a little bit by in reality, obviously Google has a large surface area on the consumer side as well that we track a lot of this activity. And as Michael had said, look, we got to take Gen AI with a pinch of salt, just like it's new to a lot of the folks, and we're testing it and putting things into some level of use. Similarly, even the bad actors, we like to say they have their own bosses and budgets. So they have their limited financing to try out these new things. So it's not like we're seeing a barrage, but let me just maybe stage the kinds of things that we're seeing a little bit and we could see more of, right? So the most obvious set are things that bad actors would use to fool what I would call personal attacks, more so than enterprise attacks, right? So it's the standard phishing emails that we would get can become a lot more creative. The two-dimensional dialogue that you can have with the text on your phone can become smarter, right? the one reason that my teenage daughter knows what I'm doing is because she keeps complaining about this reCAPTCHA that shows up as to how many cats she has to identify. You know what I mean? Like, but the evolution of reCAPTCHA could be, guessed now, right? Because you could do image scanning on the other side and impersonate people and so forth. That's like I would say the basic level. And I think we will see a lot of that, but it's also very quickly, you'll see the defenders, like whether it's a Google technology or a bunch of other technologies, we're rapidly changing the game there so that, the attackers can't get past that, right? Now, the next level is, obviously a bit more sophisticated, where today when attackers get into like a sophisticated attack or a breach in the enterprise for ransomware, they generate malware. Malware has to be obviously defined, but the generation of now novel malware can actually now get accelerated just because the capabilities exist in the way that code can be generated for developers. Malware code could be generated for attackers, right? So that's a very simple analogy. But I think the more strategic nuance that we have to be concerned about, that we actively talk about in the cyber community as a whole, is the state of attackers for ransomware in the enterprise or nation state are still limited, right? They're the few actors. When I say few, as in it's dozens or whatever you want to call it. And they're limited because they need to be really expert at what they do. And just like Gen AI can democratize our own talent on the good side, Dan, it can democratize talent on the bad side. And to the points that Paolo was mentioning, imagine now suddenly you have 100 teams sitting in a country doing the simple stuff because they could get the help from the Gen AIs, right? And that's really what I think the big trend that we just have to keep in mind is that suddenly the pyramid of all people that could be attacking could be accelerated by 10x or 100x just because of this Gen AI tools.
Yeah, those are both really great points. It almost reminds me, this has been an old challenge in the security space where you'd have, real qualified technical hackers who had skills, and then you had script kiddies who were taking little bits of code and throwing it out there and seeing what sticks. And there's, this could just make that problem even greater. And the other thing you said, I think that's very interesting, is that, part of one of the threats, the biggest threat in any organization is usually the people themselves. And AI will allow those people to be vulnerable to more types of attacks. I think that would apply especially for you, Michael. Have you changed about like how you've tried to train your staff, not just the security team, but like the rank and file, that when you get phishing emails, you should look for these things. Don't trust photos anymore. How have you started to change the way you train your staff in order to create a more secure environment that'll be a little bit more protected against these types of attacks?
It's a challenge, as you can imagine, to, sort of predict how people are going to utilize it and how they'll try to fool individuals to click on a link or do something. We continue at constant communication around the threats that we're seeing and the type of attacks, but that's not going to prevent someone from clicking on something that is new, that we haven't seen because it was generated through Gen AI, and through that sort of process. So what I always say is, while people are important and critical in this, I think we also need to leverage Gen AI in our email security systems, right? And really, to Paolo's point about sort of the where we'll see Gen AI play a role is, I think there's a preventative side, right? So we're going to see more in preventative type services, where it'll stop attacks or it'll signal sort of attack types. And we're seeing this. There's already email platforms and email with Google that use AI to do this sort of work. So you'll see that. You'll see it then in the sort of contextualization of the events that get through. So then how do you handle the events that get through and how do they work? And then how do you sort of look for and red team to the types of events that might be coming in the future based on your system configurations and stuff. So I think, it's sort of a three-prong approach, but, people are critical. We maintain a healthy sort of communication to our teams and to our staff about what we're seeing so that they're, informed, basically.
You mentioned people. I think that one of the things that has come up a couple of times is that people are still going to be necessary in this process, that these AI tools can be a companion and a partner, but the workforce may shift and the skill sets may change. How do you see like the cybersecurity industry, the human side of it, evolving as these new technologies roll out?
I think you'll get the entrance of more individuals that might not be fully skilled in IT or in security that can step in and do some of the work, right? Based on more of their soft skills, and that's around being able to troubleshoot, being able to understand, and how systems are put together and how that might be able to respond to certain events or verify the response to the events based on what the generative AI sort of comes back with. Similar to what Sunil said, and we talked about it in an earlier session, but the level of where an attacker can now start attacking has been lowered, through the use of Gen AI. That we're going to see people that might not have done it before go and try to do it because they've got some technology that they can just through basic language, spin up an event and try to make an attack out of it. So same thing on the other side, right? We're in the defense side, we'll need more people to look at the events that do make through and that are contextualized and confirm whether or not they're real or not, and then how to respond. And so there'll be a lot of work in continually working through the responses from the findings in the process.
Sunil, do you want to talk a little bit about how you see the security team evolving as these technologies roll out?
Yeah, I mean, I think look, generally the way we've looked at Gen AI, if I just take a little step back there to kind of answer that question, we call about, hey, the classical landscape, to Michael's point, was always into the 3 T's: threats, toil, and talent. So threats we just talked about, like, there's ongoing threats always, pre-Gen AI, post-Gen AI, there's always going to be variants of it. But the other 2 dimensions are interesting to talk about. And this is where we are most excited about, frankly, in addition to managing the threat landscape is, doesn't matter how many new tools you buy, like Michael's one of the consumer of these, you're still having lots of tools in security. And so ultimately at some point that creates toil for the operator, for the frontline employee in the security industry. It's just, you can get to more security, but life is more and more complex. So as execs or technology visionaries and so forth, either in the market or on the vendor side, I think part of the goal would be to find ways to increase the surface area of security, in terms of like improving your risk profile, but is there ways to also inversely drive down complexity? And this is one interesting area that Gen AI could actually change the game. In the past, we've talked about left shift, you build in security and things are good. But, even a simple things like you could generate code, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest advantages of using Bard or ChatGPT and all. If you could generate code, why won't that code have security controls also generated associated with it? Or compliance controls, right? I mean, and it's already validated. If you could generate in any test, why not generate your red team tests? Things like that, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's an amount of, if I call it creativity and productivity that we can infuse into the security frontline and the ecosystem that will reduce toil, in our opinion. That's what is a sense of excitement. And that's a low regrets move, right? It's not like we're making big decisions around remediating a big environment automatically. This is just assistive features that, hey, let me just suggest the 5 tests you should be running. You can always go change them. You can decide not to do it. And then the last but not least, if you did those first 2 on threats as well as on toil, we talked about this, right? Every company on the planet has a focus team on security. That's not enough. They're stretched to do the mundane as well as the elite work. So the goal would be, look, if there's a way to democratize security, where a developer or an IT operator could contribute to security outcomes with Gen AI tools in security, but then that frees the core security experts to up level to really focus on top level outcomes. And at that point, you've leveraged, it's not like you've added to the pool by just saying, oh, there are 10,000 more security experts, but you've looked inside the company and indirectly roped in more talent to help you on the security outcome so that your core team can focus on what really matters. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context of how we are thinking about, the real potential of this beyond threats to also toil and talent.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And I should tell our audience, we are going to do a Q&A at the end of our talk. We may answer some of these questions over the course of our conversation, but if you put your questions into the chat at the end of the conversation, we'll ask the panelists, and I'll go through those to see if there's anything that we haven't hit. Paolo, I wanted to ask you, a lot of these technologies are here today. A lot of them are some of them are open source, many of them are freely available. And yet you see there's pushback in terms of in some quarters that this may not be a responsible deployment of these technologies, and people are talking about moratoriums on research and trying to roll back some of these technologies. How effective do you think that would be, and do you think there's any need for that type of to hit the brakes here as we move into this next stage?
Yeah, it's a great question. I believe responsible AI or secure AI is a big topic. If I may spend just 1 minute about what Michael and Sunil said before about humans and data and AI, I want really to build on what they shared because it resonated a lot with me. So I wanted to share that I strongly believe that the human factor is still one of the, let's say, weakest chain or weakest link in the chain. So we really need to invest a lot of time and money in upskilling and training our people. And considering that Accenture has something like 700,000 employees, is a mission not just for the 22,000 security professionals, it's a mission to upskill and train the entire population, not just a part of it. And thinking about, as you said, about this weak link with the humans, I think that we will see also more and more attack that will leverage the so-called deep fake. So, a fake voice or video. We are starting to see an increase in attack with our threat intelligence in scams, in fraud. We are seeing also the first few research tests in order to bypass, online authentication. So this is a big topic. So I think that investing in training will be important. And about how AI will address, the so-called talent gap. In this moment in time, probably we have 3 to 4 million of unfilled security job posting. And I think that the data and the AI, generative AI more specifically, will help us to, fill the gap. And we will evolve our skill to the next level, doing a different task. Back to your question, I strongly believe that we need to consider that probably the vast majority of the current, pointly implementation of enterprises in the data AI space with the generative AI engine are probably not developed fully with security as a design principle. So I think that we have, multiple entity, body, policymaker that are thinking to, release a new regulation like the European AI Act, or like in US, more voluntary standard with the NIST standard for AI risk management. But the goal at the end is to really take this great opportunity of generative AI in a secure and responsible way. So we cannot just to think about speed of deployment, speed of the design, but we need to include something like a governance framework, an ethic blueprint, in order to be sure that we are embedding, as also multiple governments in the G7 are asking for, the right safeguards in order to have a more secure generative AI in place, because there is a huge power and should be under more control.
Yeah, I hesitate to go to Sunil, but I would say, do you want to chime in on that in terms of where, I mean, obviously the regulatory environment in Europe is very different than in the United States, but a lot of people are asking the same questions about how this is happening. You know, what's your take on how we can deploy this technology in sort of a responsible and controlled way?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to chime in for sure, because this is, as you can imagine, this is also near and dear to the Google heart, right? So I think, and before we get to security, let me just set the stage. Like as Paulo eloquently said, look, in mainland, in the EU, but also beyond the EU, into Asia countries, LATAM and all, there's been a global wave of what we call digital sovereignty. And digital sovereignty is broken down into three parts, Dan, right? The first part is like data sovereignty, which is, hey, first of all, I need all my data in my region, in my country, for various, boundary regulations and things like that. The second thing is what we're calling operational sovereignty, which is, hey, not only should my thing be stored in my country and region, it needs to be operated with people that I trust. Because it's only a matter of time. Well, so what if my data is there, but if I'm being operated by somebody in the US and some new president or somebody comes and says, look, cut off all access, then you're in a tough spot, right? And then the last thing is, in the case of a black swan event, we need the ability to also cut back to something to run the business. We call that software sovereignty, because what happens is when you, in the world of cloud, most of the cloud providers are American companies. And so any international country, rightfully so, is trying to structure this digital sovereignty strategy in those three elements. And Google, at least for what it's worth, from a Google Cloud side, has laid out an aggressive plan across all three. We were, I'd just say, pretty ahead of the game there, partly because we had an opportunity to get there 2-3 years ago, just because on the consumer side with ads and privacy, we had to deal with that for like 10 years, right? So now in the same vein, when it comes to AI, of course, this is no news, where the market was like, look, Google has been a little bit more conservative, cautious. When we came out with AI, ChatGPT has taken share or whatever, Microsoft. But in reality, I think things have normalized down, right? As to, hey, where BART is, where a bunch of these capabilities are. But I think the theme that we use is bold and responsible. And you have to do both. You cannot do one or the other. And so hopefully folks have seen this coming out in the last few months from Google all up, and the number of innovations we're doing in Google Cloud as well as in Google Cloud Security. But the responsible piece is going to be built on top of things around sovereignty and privacy that, Paulo just talked about, right? So we will still say, hey, we will train your models on data that resides in your region. By the way, if you want to give prompts, that data never leaves the customer boundary. It's never training our model. So there's like a series of what I would call checks and balances that are built natively into our enterprise AI tooling that we are coming out with. And essentially those who are already checking the box, or at least doing all the right things on sovereignty, regulatory, and compliance. So all the AI stuff inherits all that sovereignty and compliance capabilities, but then adds this data privacy element, so that people are not inadvertently training, any of the Google or OpenAI on your source code, right? So those are the kinds of things that we are calling as a responsible portion alongside them.
Cool. I just noticed we did get a question in for you, actually, Sunil, on what does the future of cybersecurity look like with remote computing, remote working thrown into the mix? We were talking, it's the pandemic seems like a long time ago, but I'm working from home. It looks like you are too. How has that changed the threat landscape?
It's a great question. So I think in many ways, and this is not novel, I think there's some research from Accenture on this already, but ultimately we should view the home as an edge. And just like we have the edge of the data center, then we have an enterprise edge. We're talking about edge computing and all. In post-COVID world, if you just expand our brain to say, hey, is there a way to create sort of like a zone called a virtual edge on your home laptop or your professional laptop, but through your network, through your Wi-Fi and everything else, at least the enterprise portion of it is still managed as a virtual edge. And the way to do that is to obviously not use traditional techniques, right? Or the old school, hey, we can't put a firewall there or whatever. But with this new wave of zero trust is a good, I mean, people talk about it, but if you can couple zero trust with a truly browser-based capabilities, then there's a way to actually create that sort of, secure zone for you wherever you are at home, so that data leakage is not happening. You're not inadvertently sending stuff on email. There's just a lot of like data, privacy as well as access control built into it. And that's, may not be as, sort of like directly related to this conversation on Gen AI, but there is a parallel, if I can call it, virtual edge conversation going on, where you have elements of zero trust, browser-based security, and a bunch of things coming together to sort of provide that layer of control. Now, it turns out that once you have that, you can then push forward, capabilities in Gen AI to say, hey, I see some anomalous behavior, warn the user. You know what I mean? I'm saying, Dan, so that's what I meant by saying in Chrome. I don't know how many of you use personal Gmail, but you'll start seeing, hey, do you want to use enhanced safe browsing? And enhanced safe browsing is just a way for saying, look, your kids may not know everything that you're doing, right? So it's just a good way to, quote unquote, bring some of that control, but in a low friction way.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I do think the point that the user could be a point of vulnerability. A lot of those scamming and spamming and deep fakes are going to be targeting people at home where their defenses may not be up in the same way. So let me get to the sort of some of the wrap-up questions here. When you're working with, how have your conversations changed with the C-suite, with the sort of rise of AI? What kind of traction are you getting with companies and business leaders in terms of changing the, making investments in this space? Obviously, Accenture's made a huge investment in the AI space, so it sounds like people are pretty bought in there, $3 billion worth of investment. But like, when you're talking to CEOs, what kind of conversations are you having with them, and how are they seeing this technology as more of an opportunity or more of a threat? And Paolo, maybe you could chime in.
Yeah, Dan, for sure, short answer, as an opportunity. We strongly believe that all the emerging tech is not just generative AI. We can talk about quantum computing. Sunil talked about edge, are obviously both a risk and an opportunity, but the opportunity is much more important, and we can manage the remaining risk in the right way. In our experience, we have released back in January during the Davos session with the World Economic Forum a specific report about the security trends that we see in the market, interviewing C-suite executives. So not just a security expert, but also business leader. What we have learned during the survey is that we have a much better, compared to the past, alignment between business leader, CEO, board, and the CISO. This is improving materially, so much better awareness about, as you said, the related risk of those emerging technology. But at the same time, we have also captured that despite this kind of better awareness, there is not yet, or not in all situations, the right, let's say, call to action. So awareness is good, but what we are planning to do in order to fix the issue. And what is the issue? And the report is very meaningful because we pointed out through the interview that the vast majority of the, let's say, respondents said that they expect in the next 2 years a material cyber attack to their enterprises, a material one, not an easy one. And at the same time, just a few were instead thinking that they are, let's say, resilient enough to manage this kind of cyber attack upcoming. So the so-called systemic cyber resilience is not yet here, or not entirely. We need to do much more work in that direction. So thinking when my global CEO is talking with her peers, when I have the opportunity to talk with the C-suite directly, I think that they are thinking about how to adopt emerging technology in the more responsible and secure way. So we talked already about generative AI, but if I may, they are also thinking about, okay, with quantum computing, Chinese researcher started to claim about their ability to decrypt encrypted information. Maybe it's just a claim, probably it's just a claim, but this will be true in maybe 2-3 years. And so we are starting to see new threat actors that are stealing information now to decrypt tomorrow in the future when they will have enough quantum computing power in order to decrypt them. So CEO are thinking how we can be ready to the next digital revolution in a secure way.
I can't believe you brought up quantum computing towards the end of our conversation. We're going to have to schedule another call to get into quantum. But let me ask. I want to ask each of you before we end, and if we have more questions, please put them into the Q&A. But we've been fairly optimistic in terms of how this balance between attackers and defenders is going to go, and the potential for generative AI to make an impact. But what is it that about this new technology that keeps each of you up at night? What do you worry about? What do you think could go wrong? We're talking security. Let's talk a worst case scenario. What could go terribly wrong here? And maybe we'll start with you, Michael, since you've got lots of things to worry about.
Look, yeah, there's a lot, obviously, and I think a lot of great points from Paolo and Sunil. When you look at how a business uses their data, how they allow people to consume and then provide sort of intelligence against it, it's important that we've got the right data governance structure in place, and we've got the right frameworks in place to protect that data. While ChatGPT is really a consumer-based product, the reason we're talking about it, right? AI has been, as we said, been around a long time, but we're talking about it because ChatGPT, Bard, the others, has made it a consumer product, not a business product, right? And so it's important on all of us, security, business, all that, to understand how we differentiate between that consumer product and how you might use it in your daily life versus what you do in the business and how you use it for your business, and how you protect that data that you use in the business, both how you set it up to use it for generative AI, but then how do you use it and consume it to do business itself, right? So I think, what keeps me up, obviously, is anything. It's a misconfiguration. It's some way someone's put the data out that's easily accessible. We spend a lot of time in security about protecting against the attacks, but it could just be that one simple configuration that someone set that it's public now, and all of a sudden your research, your material is out on the open internet. And it's not that someone attacked it, it's someone, you just consumed it when they shouldn't have. So, for me, it's really setting up the right frameworks, having the right awareness in your business around what is business critical and internal versus what's external, and ensuring that we focus on the protection of the both identity and then the data sets that we have in our business.
Points. Sunil, what keeps you up?
I think Michael and Paolo hit this already, but so I'll just keep it brief. I think my meta concern would be, like the internet or mobile, we're going to screw things up sometime soon on Gen AI, right? It's just inevitable. But that shouldn't take away our ambition and our aspiration to change the world with some groundbreaking technology like Gen AI. And as long as people both expect that something will happen, right? I mean, this is what happens with all these kinds of things. But as Paolo mentioned before, the greater good that we could do with it over the next 20 years far surpasses whatever near term we'll see. So I think as long as people keep that in context, I think we'll be great.
All right. Paolo, is there anything that's keeping you up at night? You seem pretty positive here.
You asked for the worst case, not the best case. So
that's
about
right.
The worst case, I was thinking about what Michael and Sunil shared. And I'm thinking also about the last few years large-scale cyber attack. Is coming to my mind, I don't know, Colonial Pipeline or Log4j. So what I'm thinking about right now, how the misuse or the weaponization of generative AI can impact large systemic cyber attack on national critical infrastructure. So they will probably be able to orchestrate large-scale cyber attack more timely and more effective on well-known or not yet known vulnerability that are part maybe of multiple supply chain of our enterprises. So this is the scenario that we need to counter and to avoid, because I totally agree with Sanil. Future looks good, and our job is to protect the future.
Cool. Maybe I'm gonna read some of the questions we've been getting in as they come, and just forgive me while I scan through these. We got a question from Mike. Says, my biggest concern is the malicious use of AI. How can we improve LLMs and logic in AI to verify information is correct at the same time to allow the AI engine to learn? I think this is our biggest challenge with AI. So they're referring to, like, you know, the hallucinations, which we've seen pop up. And I don't know who wants to take a stab at that.
No, I can start. I mean, obviously, this is central to all things foundational on Gen AI is, look, how to manage the downside and reduce that, knowing that there is a level of that downside in play with hallucinations and so forth. So this is one of the reasons, to Michael's original point, like we need to be high on the ambition on Gen AI and measured on the practicality of it, right? And while on the consumer side, you know, we can ask questions as long as we get 3 out of 5 good answers, it's still value, right? Mm-hmm. But that 2 bad answers are more tolerable, way more tolerable on the consumer side than the enterprise side. So I think, at least on the enterprise side, what a big thing that you will start seeing is that the quality of the models will improve the more specialized they are. And so that's one of the things, you know, in partnership, you may have seen this between a bunch of us. We've actually launched, like at least in Google Cloud, we've launched a security LLM, because the natural models don't understand cybersecurity the way a cybersecurity specialist wants it to be, right? So if you remember the point that Paolo was saying about how the threat intel teams have come together between Accenture, Mandiant, and so forth, we're taking some of that data and training the core Google models on it, so that essentially the lingua that somebody interacts with becomes much more of a cybersecurity aware, right? Mm-hmm. So over time, while the quality is a big concern, and just rest assured, that's what we mean by, while being bold but also responsible, is not just on privacy but on quality. We will get there in the near future, but the core premise is that the more specialized it is, the sooner not only can we get there, but we can stay consistently high quality.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a great point, and that this is not where ChatGPT takes a lot of the oxygen. It's a lot of the conversation, but we're really going to move into a world where there will be many LLMs, and the more specialized they are, the more curated they are. That's where I think you can solve for a lot of that, a lot of those issues. You know, the ones that are open to consumers are literally trying to do everything and anything, and that's an interesting frontier, but it does leave these vulnerabilities. I don't know if you guys have been following the news today. I did not see this yet, but evidently a lot of big AI firms are at the White House today to volunteer with controlling the AI environment. We have a listener that wants to know how you guys feel about that. What are the prospects
if I may
of that
start first, but I believe one of the companies, Google, so Sanil can talk much better than me. But it's amazing, because I think that independently by the regulatory model, if it's a US kind of voluntary standard, or is more like Europe Data and AI Act, the goal is to have the right commitment from the top tech company in order to really design, develop, and implement secure and responsible generative AI. This is the goal. Then you have many different ways to achieve the same goal. So let's see what will happen. But for sure, I see that this news is, the confirmation that not just the technology company, and the large enterprises, but also all the governments, especially the G7, are thinking about how we can, as Sunil said, leverage this huge power of generative AI in the most responsible way. So this is, I believe, a great example of a public-private partnership.
Well, we're coming up close to time. Are there any, I just want to give each of you the opportunity to sort of give a key takeaway for our audience. What do you want people to know? We've talked about the possible risks. We've talked about the potential upsides. What's the key takeaway that you want to give viewers before we sign off?
You need to be open-minded. You need to be a champion in this space. You need to, work, if you're, in the security space, you need to work with your business leaders to make sure that there's responsible use and a responsible buildup of the models that you might use within your business. I think it's incumbent on us all to challenge our third parties. Third parties and the people that you're working with can be some of your biggest risks, especially if you're taking the right action within your own organization. So just make sure that you're a leader in promoting the safe use of generative AI and leveraging it both from a business perspective, but also from a cybersecurity perspective.
Very cool. Sunil, takeaways?
Again, I just go back to stay hopeful, stay promising on this. I think there's a lot of strong technology coming our way. So to the extent people can remain curious, I think we'll all be in a better spot, just personally as well as professionally.
Good advice. Paolo?
Yeah, from my side is also a mix of the two. So I think that we needed to capture this opportunity. And because also the threat landscape is changing and the attack techniques will evolve, it's, as I said, an innovation race. So in this innovation race, my advice is to reset the way we are defending our enterprises and thinking about how we can leverage generative AI to protect them more and better.
Those are great words. Obviously, we're at an inflection point, but this conversation is going to continue. I hope we can do it on techonomy.com. Hope we can do it at our event on AI in November, the AI Dilemma down in Lake Nona, Florida. But this has been a great conversation, guys. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I think we got a lot out of it.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Amazing.
All right. Have a great weekend. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm Dan Costa with Techonomy, and stay safe out there.